Hey y'all, I'm Chandler Stevens with The Grounded Founder, and in this video, I'm going to talk through the lowdown and a way to download your highest self. Now, at the outset, I can appreciate that the phrase highest self may sound a bit squishy, so I'm going to do my best to at least provide a provisional definition of this. We could consider your highest self as you at your most capable. This is you free from the burdens of shame and anxiety. This is the best and most beautiful expression of the essential idea that is you. And this is you in service to the sacred. Now, if you hear any of that and you go, well, then you saved yourself a good bit of time here. You can skip this video. However, if you listen to all of that and you think, yeah, sign me up. Well, then I think you're in the right place. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through, I'm actually going to guide you through step by step somatic practice, a way to center yourself more effectively and to, I believe, avail yourself of the support that is available to you everywhere and always. Now, here's what I mean. And again, we may lose some followers or some viewers in this particular section, but one of the things I experienced when my life was falling apart around me was that an awareness of the support of the ground taught me quite a bit about what it is to be held in God's embrace. Now, you may interpret those words in many different ways. I didn't personally have much of a religious upbringing. I came into a religious experience of myself from the bottom up. Essentially, when I was losing my mind and burning out, and so many things just, again, seemed to be crumbling all around me, the one thing that I could really rely on was the support of the ground. And luckily, I had about a decade's worth of practice in embodiment and somatic education to carry me through this very difficult time. And what I found was when it was difficult to trust much of anything else in my lived experience day to day, I could trust the support of the ground. I knew that if I could avail myself of that support, I could create a much more capable version of myself in, frankly, any moment. And you can get an experience of this right here, right now, a kind of condensed version of this longer practice that we'll go through. Would you take a moment and simply shift your attention downward to where you notice the support of some surface beneath you, whether that's the chair, whether that's the floor, whatever the case is. Notice what parts of you are most clearly connected to that base of support. And if you give it a few moments more, simply shifting your attention downward, you might also conjure up the image of an hourglass. If you tilt it and you have the grains of sand begin to pile up. And if you've ever seen that, they have this characteristic way of piling up. The base gets a bit wider, pile gets a bit taller, and you may actually have a similar experience of this yourself. If you hold that image in mind and notice the support beneath you, you may have a sense that your base begins to get a little wider. And you, without forcing yourself upright or anything like that, you may actually become a little taller within yourself. Now, that's a very condensed version of the practice, but notice, is there some difference that makes a difference in your experience of yourself right here and right now? Is this perhaps a bit more of the way that you'd like to experience yourself day to day or in the face of stressful situations, in the midst of conflict? Would it be useful to have this kind of support available to you? Probably, yeah. I mean, certainly you're much more able to respond with intention to the world when you have that support than if you're slumped and crumbled up within yourself, right? I mean, this is not me at my most potent. But if I begin to connect to that support, you can see, you can hear that something changes in the way that I am, right? So You could be done with this video now, but for the remainder of this time, I'm going to guide you through a little more in-depth exploration of this, a way to really avail yourself of this support in order to allow this highest self, this best and most beautiful expression of you to flower from the support of the ground. So, if you're with me, let's begin. Notice, as you sit here, that there are certain parts of you most clearly connected to the base of support, to the chair, the floor. Now, when you begin to make a couple of movements, small movements, simply tilting your pelvis a bit forward. It's as if you're going to bring your pubic bone on the front side of the pelvis a little closer to that support. So you tilt yourself forward and then return to the center and make that movement several times. It doesn't need to be a big, exaggerated movement. It can be small, it can be subtle. It could be so small, actually, that from the outside, no one would really be able to know what you're doing. But you, in your internal awareness, you would know that you're tilting your pelvis forward and then returning to the center. Now, if you make a few more of these movements, you can begin to explore the manner in which you make this movement, the how you're doing what you're doing, which is to say, you can notice which muscles are involved in the making of this movement. So you may find that you are engaging the musculature of the low back to drive the pelvis forward. That's a way to do it. You may find that you're actually recruiting the hip flexors to pull your pelvis forward. Here's another way to do it. And you could make a few alternations of those two strategies. One, more intentionally engaging your low back. And in the second, intentionally engaging your hip flexors, almost as if you're going to lift your knees away from the ground while you're sitting there. So perhaps you make a couple more movements like this. And then simply pause, let that go. Have a little time to do nothing in particular. And as you go about doing this nothing in particular, perhaps you can notice what, if anything, is different about the way that you're sitting here. What, if anything, is different about the way that you seem to relate to the world around you? Now, let's begin a different move, similar but different. Would you tilt your pelvis a bit backwards? So you can think of this as bringing your tailbone closer to the chair, or perhaps as lifting your pubic bone. And then return to the center again. And make that movement several times as well. Simply tilt your pelvis backwards and come to the center. And again, as you do this, you can become more and more aware of how it is you do this, the means whereby you make this move. Some people may find that they are engaging their abdominals, like curling in on themselves to do this. Others may find they are pressing into the ground a bit more with their feet. So you can start to explore for yourself what muscles are involved in making this tiny movement. Then you could give it 1, 2, maybe 3 more repetitions, and then once more, pause and check in with yourself now to see what, if anything, is different in your experience. Now, let's go ahead and link those two movements, and we'll discover something pretty important, actually, about the way that you carry yourself in the world. So first, maybe you tilt your pelvis forward, and then you return through the center and tilt your pelvis backwards. And if you move forward and backward like that, it's only going to take you a couple of repetitions to discover that there's actually something very important about the length of you. Now, when you're at your center, you're actually tallest, right? And when you come forward, you get a little smaller. When you go backward, you get a little smaller as well. And you'll also begin to discover that when you move forward or when you move backward, you're actually having to work more. You're having to recruit your musculature to take yourself off of that center position. So when you come through the center point, you're tallest and it takes the least effort. And that's a pretty remarkable combination, actually, when we think about it from a physical perspective. But to begin to refine your awareness of this, would you make the forward and backward movement smaller and smaller, more and more subtle, until eventually it's almost as if you're just oscillating forward and backward right around your centermost point. And when you feel like you've got it, you're really clear in your center, you connected to your base of support, would you pause there? And in a position like this, I don't know, I personally find it to be a remarkable experience. It's exquisite. There's just I feel so open and available for the world when I'm centered like this. And maybe you have a similar experience. Maybe your experience differs some. But I'm willing to bet that if nothing else, if you could maintain this quality of centering within yourself, you would be a bit more capable. If you could find this base of support and maintain this length up and through yourself, if you could do that in the midst of conflict, in stressful situations, all sorts of emotional turmoil, you would probably be a little better off in those situations, right? Certainly, you're going to be able to respond better than if you're, again, slumped within yourself or kind of posturing and putting up some false front. Yeah. If you could do away with that unnecessary work and simply start to oscillate around your centermost point, that, I believe, would be a bit closer to the best and most beautiful expression of the essential idea of you, which, as I mentioned at the outset, is something we could consider your highest self. So, perhaps in closing, if you find this centered position, you can imagine for yourself what is possible for you from this way of experiencing yourself. If this is how you came from yourself, and this is how you moved through the world day to day, what kind of different trajectory would that set you on in the next 3 months, in the next year, in the next decade? And maybe you compare that with the way that you typically carry yourself. Maybe you get a little smaller in yourself. And then you think, well, what's the trajectory like from here in the next 3 months, in the next year, in the next decade? And if you find that you actually like the experience of yourself in the more centered position, if that seems to open up the horizon in a more favorable way, well, lucky for you, you now have a skill that you can practice and deploy in more and more situations in your life. So I hope this is of some use to you. I find in my own life that when I'm most clearly aware of the support of the ground, it connects me most clearly to the support of God in my life too. I have a really clear sense that I'm sandwiched between God up here and the ground down here. And boy, in that kind of sandwich, just the world's a playground at that point. So anyway, again, I hope this is a blessing for you. I hope this is of use. If you're curious to learn more about this kind of approach, in the link below this video, I'll share a document that has some information about the Grounded Founder Framework. And you may very well find that it could be of tremendous value for you moving forward too. So anyway, be well, and I will look forward to talking to you soon.